All right, folks. Hope you guys are having a great day. I know I am. It's very sunny today here in the beautiful California Central Valley. Breadbasket of the world. It's always where it's the thing where it's like, hey, we're gonna oppress them yokels out in the country. We're the ones who grow all the food. We'll be fine. You know? What if the economy collapses? We grow the food. So, I won't starve at least. Though it may be hard to talk to y'all. Alright. Hope you guys are having a great day. Yeah, so let's get into it. We'll play a little bit. I was just thinking about something today. I know a lot of people that are watching the channel may be thinking about, like, how do I like have a garden? How do I grow my own food? I see a lot of people talking about homesteading and that kind of stuff. And so I just want to say a couple things about it before we dive into gaming, because I think it's something that can be really fun to grow your own food. And you can grow really healthy food, and you can do it very easily. And you actually need less space than you think you do to grow most of the kinds of food that you would actually want to eat on a regular basis. Now, the kinds of food that you actually need lots of land to grow are also foods that require, a lot of equipment to harvest. So staples like wheat, rice, that is something that you're probably not going to be able to grow on your own. But even if you live in a suburban neighborhood, it's actually quite easy to grow a large amount of food that you would eat to, say, supplement your regular diet. So if you are buying meat and grains from the store, then you can grow your own fruit. And in fact, one of the easiest things that you can do to grow your own food is to plant fruit trees. Fruit trees grow really easily. There's very little maintenance to most fruit trees. We're talking for high productivity trees, like I have a peach tree, and my peach tree makes more peaches than my family could possibly eat. We give them away or trade them for other things. And the amount of effort required to maintain that peach tree involves pruning it once per year. That's all I have to do. So a tree is a really, really good option. And if you're worried about how much water does a tree require, just plant it in your lawn. And if you have sprinklers, your tree's going to get more than enough water it needs to grow big, nice fruit. And depending on where you live, different trees are going to be better choices. So if you're in Poland, the best kind of trees that you could grow are actually trees like apple trees and cherry trees. They do really good in northern climates. They benefit from a very long day kind of summer. So apples and cherries, plums as well. Plums grow really good in southern climates as well. But those kinds of fruit trees you can grow. They winter really nicely. They get really tall. They become great shade trees if you want to grow them that way. If you're growing them for fruit, you actually want to probably prune a lot of your trees a little bit lower so that you don't have to get out a massive cherry picker to pick the cherries, or like get up in a ladder and do all that kind of work. But apple trees are great. I have an apple tree. My apples are not as big and nice as the apples that, say, my friends in British Columbia will grow, right? So I've had a friend on the channel a bunch of times, Jesse White. He's a comic artist, and I'll probably have him on because him and John are coming out with a new comic called Deus Vult, which is definitely going to be good. And I'm really looking forward to that one. He has apple trees. I think he has probably several, and he has way better apples than mine, probably because the longer summer days make the fruit grow bigger. If you're down here, if you're in a Mediterranean climate, so if you're in, Italy, Spain, Levant somewhere, North Africa, climate really similar to California. Citrus grows really good. It doesn't require a ton of water. Olives are great. In fact, I will probably want to plant an olive tree here at some point because I just love olives and I love olive oil. And it's not that hard to press your own olive oil. You don't need like one of those big giant industrial presses. Those are for people who have olive orchards and are needing to press a lot of oil. But you can press your own oil, and you can just eat the olives because they're really good. They're actually a really good fat source. So you could think about your diet, the things that are kind of hard to have in your diet, things like oil. Growing an olive tree can provide you with enough fat in your diet that you don't have to buy olive oil or use butter or things like that. You just have the fat growing on the tree. How awesome is that? Same thing with an avocado tree. Avocados grow really good here. They grow great in Mexico. They're not going to grow great if you're in Poland, for instance. So anyway, that's a suggestion. If you're looking like, man, I'd like to grow some of my own food, think about a fruit tree first. They're very low maintenance. They provide shade. And you don't really have to do much. You just leave the sprinklers on and your fruit tree is going to grow big enough and grow big enough fruit for you to eat. In fact, if you're in a normal suburban environment, you really don't have to treat the fruit tree unless something weird happens. Now, one of my trees has leaf curl, which is a fungus. The reason it has that is because, well, I'm surrounded by agriculture, so those things can spread from other things. Unless you're doing monoculture, like a whole orchard of peaches, you're not going to have to deal with treating and things like that. You don't really have to deal with pesticides much. If you have ant problems, you just can leave some ant bait out, and that's pretty much going to be good enough to stop the ants from eating your fruit. Might have problems with birds, but not even then. Like, I usually don't have problems with birds. The amount of fruit that the birds pick off is so little that it's like, it's not, you guys have some fruit, I can't even eat all the fruit. The fruit trees I have, just so you know, I have a lemon tree. I might take that out. I have a lime tree. I really like citrus fruit for that reason. I might plant an orange tree. Those get really huge, though. I have a peach tree, an apple tree, and a loquat tree. The loquat tree is a very nice shade tree. It goes kind of straight up and has this big kind of balloon. It looks like almost a cartoonish tree. Those are really good. At my old house, I really only had stuff that I could grow in the garden bed. If you're looking to grow vegetables in the garden bed, that's a lot more effort. So I would start with the fruit tree because the fruit is really good to eat and it's really good for you. And, that's a great way to start. Basically, you can grow your own vegetables to eat, grow your own fruit to eat. Really hard to grow your own staples. So I would buy rice and buy grains and flour. You don't need that many in your diet anyway, and then grow everything else you can. And then, of course, I have chickens. So if you're looking to have a little bit of protein every day, that's just really natural and good for you, get a little chicken coop and some chickens. They're really cheap to feed. I go through one bag of feed maybe every 2 months. And they eat all the insects in the yard, so they keep the yard clean. My wife wants to plant like tomatoes and that kind of stuff, peppers. We're going to have to put some chicken wire around them because the chickens will eat your little vegetables. They just will eat anything, but they will eat all your bugs. So you have your chickens come out and they'll take care of a lot of the pests for you. Grapes. Oh, so I used to grow grapes and I might grow more grapes. So here's the way I grew grapes at my old house. I had 2 grapevines and I had a big balcony. I had a big wooden balcony and I just trained the vines to grow up on top of the balcony over a lattice. So they provided shade. The vines would provide shade in the summer. The grapes would grow down and you could just reach down and pick them. And we ate them and stuff. We had white Thompson seedless grapes. And that's a really easy way to do it. So if you have a porch or something or you want to build a lattice, you can just plant your grapevines there by it and train up the branches. So as the branches grow, you just tie them onto the top and they'll grow up over the top and create shade for you. And that's a great way to grow them. They get full sun on your porch, on top of your porch, if you have like a lattice or a trestle, whatever we call it. One of those things where it's not really shade. It's just a bunch of beams above you. That's really for growing vines originally. That's a Mediterranean thing. So grow those up and you can have tons of great grapes to eat. So anyway, a little bit of advice on growing your own food. Growing your own food is really good. Can you grow stuff inside? You can, but it costs energy because you have to get grow lights and stuff. How do you think people grow marijuana? They grow it inside with grow lights. So you can get all that from a hydroponics store, the store that sells marijuana equipment. You can grow your own vegetables inside too, if you want to. But it just requires energy, and so I don't know if there's any plant I would bother to grow inside. There are some plants that grow pretty good in cold weather, like snow peas and stuff. So you can look into those if you're in a colder climate. My mom has about 200 chickens in a barn out back. Problem is, half of them are silky snowbirds with tiny eggs and sparse black meat. Yeah, but the silkies are cute. They're really cute chickens. I have a Rhode Island Red and a leghorn. Might get a couple more chickens. We figured we'd start with 2 and see how those 2 do. They're good friends. They lay an egg a day, pretty much each of them. So I have 2 eggs a day, and now that doesn't go that far with 4 people. That's why we want to get more eggs. But most of my diet is actually egg whites that I buy from Costco. So I just mix in a yolk. Like I have 1 egg and then egg whites, like a half cup of egg whites. And that's good protein for me for a meal. And then I feed my kids pretty much same thing. They have an egg and some egg whites and then split it up. So they both are eating eggs every day, which is good for them. Maybe Callie should return to Mexico. Lives there, love Mexicans so much, and they probably could use to boost the economy. Well, I mean, it's Mexicans that vote here. So that's how it is. I don't know about that. I don't think people would actually want that because you have not a good political system in Mexico, in my opinion. You end up with a cartel kind of system that I don't think is very good. Anyway, let's play some Final Fantasy and we'll keep chatting. But I thought I'd mention that. Just, I know a lot of people are thinking, how can I grow a garden? You know, before you go all out buying, you know, raised flower beds and this kind of stuff, setting all that kind of thing up, that requires a little bit more maintenance to grow vegetables versus growing fruit trees. So try a fruit tree, and a fruit tree provides shade. They're really good. So vegetables, I think, are great if you don't have trees around or you really want certain vegetables. But if you can have a selection of fruit trees, you'll always have fruit available. And it's good. It's good. All right, let's see here. Final Fantasy. There we go. Now, I actually lost all my progress the other day because the emulator crashed. So that was fun. That was fun. It's so sunny today. Like, the lighting in my room is all weird. Looks like it's all brightly lit. I actually might tweak it a little bit here because it's so bright. We'll turn down the exposure just a little bit. So it's not quite so, like, everything's drowned out here. Yep. By the way, if you want to know what controller I'm using, it's this 8-bit DOE SN30 Pro Plus. So it looks like an SNES controller. The top feels like an SNES controller. The D-pad's really pretty close, but you can use it to play other things as well. So it's really a controller I love. It's like what I wish the PlayStation controller was. Almost 50K, David. Thank you. I actually lost like 1,000 subscribers. I think because they were cleaning out accounts or banning accounts, and then there's just older inactive accounts, then they get rid of them. So occasionally they do that. We own a small piece of land with a little orchard, garden, and a greenhouse. My mom is crazy about gardening. Our basement is full of jars with vegetables and fruits. That's good. You know, that's the other thing, too, is like my parents used to like pickle and preserve things, too, because things come into season at one time and you want to eat them later. So they pickled, you know, they would pickle cabbage and stuff. So they grow the cabbages and pickle them and make sauerkraut out of them. Maybe you're not into sauerkraut. I don't know where you're from, but sauerkraut, I'm not a big fan of sauerkraut, but they liked it. And they grew cucumbers and made their own pickles. They, you know, you can make your own jams and stuff. You can make, if you go, like we have a peach tree. We made some peach jam. It didn't turn out very good, but you can make it. You can make applesauce, which you can freeze and eat. If you have a cherry tree, of course, you can freeze your cherries and eat them later. Or make cherry jam. Cherry jam is very underrated, I think. Still playing Dragon Quest XI. Yeah. I beat the final boss, but it forced me to go back in time and do more. It's really a drag at this point. I just want to do it. I like the episodic nature of Dragon Quest XI. Each little town you go to feels like it has its own little story. Kind of like you're playing through a little anime series or something. In the days before year-round grocery stores, everyone used to know how to do that stuff. That's a good, yeah. It's really like, yeah, this cave is rough. Right? I'm just going to level up a little bit. Yeah, you're right. Well, we have, I mean, our economy is, we have such a good amount of global trade, people often don't think about things only being available certain times of the year. In fact, the main thing I think about being available certain times of the year are certain kinds of fruits like cherries. And I kind of like Christmas time because I can get cherries from Chile. So they fly them in from Chile and Argentina, and then I can have cherries, which is great. Fight the mummies. And we will go... Actually, does he have the item? No. Let's go fire 2. Zeus. Just play the parts you want and ignore the rest. I never 100% RPGs. Yeah, I don't 100% RPGs most of the time either. It has to be like a really, really good RPG that also makes doing all the extra stuff fun and enjoyable. Like Final Fantasy X had all those Ultima weapons and stuff. I never bothered getting those because they are too much work. And you don't really need them to finish the game. And I never had enough gold to get Yojimbo either. So next time I play it, I'm going to see if I can grind up enough gil to get Yojimbo. He's like a secret boss in this cave. Kind of going up to Mount Larayu or wherever. Right before you fight, what's his name? That guapo guy. Sid. Is it Sid? No. Seymour. You fight Seymour a second time. He's before that. He's kind of, I don't know if I'd call him secret. But anyway, you can buy him for enough gil, and if you pay him gil, he'll wipe out. He can like wipe out a lot of bosses if you pay him a lot of gil. So you can pay him like 100,000 gil, and he'll just kill any boss in the game. Is what it's like. Yeah, KOTOR is one of my favorite games. I think it's the best. I'm going to say it's the best Star Wars game. I'm going to say it's the best Star Wars game. I think. I'm a bit late in life to have nostalgia for the old RPGs, but Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door will always be one of my favorites. I have that one. Nintendo has stopped giving games such personality and flavor. I'm going to try the new one. I have it, but my son really wanted to play it, so I made it a reward for doing stuff. I'm like, man, I really want to play this game, but I kind of already made it a reward, so I can't just, like, open it up and play it. Be like, I get to play it. Oh, wizards. Where's my hearing aid? In my pocket? Where did I put that thing? I'm just having trouble hearing the music. I think it's in the other room. I think it's in the other room. And to be fair, who wants to voluntarily play Blitzball to get Wakka's ultimate? Yeah, I mean, that's probably my big complaint is like, I don't want to play Blitzball. Blitzball was like the worst minigame ever. I didn't like Blitzball at all. And then also last time I played, you know, you only have this one opportunity to get the eject shot. And if you're not paying close attention, it's like you don't get it. And then Blitzball's 100 times harder. If you have the eject shot, it's just, you just do that. And like you win every time. Like, I don't want to do, like, I don't want to do the, Blitzball thing. Now, I kind of like optional content in RPGs, though. Like, optional bosses. So I remember, like, The Last Remnant has a whole set of ultimate there's like the White Conqueror. There's all these extra bosses that you can fight. And I kind of like that. They kind of have that with Final Fantasy 13 with post-game stuff, which is kind of cool. Go for it. Don't suffer here with barely hearing the music. I mean, I could turn it up. Put on my headphones. See, these headphones are so good, like it blocking out sound. I can't hear my own voice when I put them on. Like, I can't hear anything. It's just, it's too hard to. I need some kind of echo. Make sure I'm not sounding awful. Got some HP here. Yeah, I love Knights of the Old Republic. KOTOR 2 apparently is really hard to stream. So, I don't know. I might find some way to do that. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, though. It'd probably be something needlessly complex, like having an HDMI capture card in between my PC and one of my monitors, which then goes into OBS, which then yada, yada, yada. It's not a... these headphones, these are... What are these? Oh, yeah. These are Bayer Dynamic DT770 Pro. I don't know how much these cost. Probably like $150. These are studio headphones. These are studio monitors. I really like them for recording guitar parts and vocal parts because then you only hear the mic or you only hear the guitar, which is great. For that, they're really comfortable, and they're low enough. You can get them in 3 different variants. So actually, let's keep grinding. You can get them in a couple different impedances. So there's a really high impedance. This is an 80 ohm. I think they have like a 15, an 80, and like a 200 ohm. The 200 ohm is like if you're using a headphone amp with the DAC and everything, then that's the one you want to get. You have to push them pretty hard to get them to respond. So you can't plug them into your phone. You won't hear anything. They're too low output. There's too much impedance. The 80 ohm ones are in the middle. They'll work in a phone. They're plenty loud in a phone, but they're not really set up for plugging into your phone. The lower impedance ones are better for your phone. If you're just looking for like great headphones to just plug into a regular headphone jack. Actually, you know, if you're looking for really reasonably priced studio quality headphones, you should probably look at AKG. What are they? Oh my gosh, I have a pair of them somewhere that broke. K280s or something. They're really good, and they're usually like $60. So for $60, you can get a really good set of headphones that'll work with your phone. They're low impedance, 55 ohms, which is a very good, moderately low impedance. So they make these ones with different impedance levels, basically, so depending on what you're doing, you can get the right response out of it. If you don't know about impedance and everything, just get the lower impedance ones. You're probably not going to be doing like a bunch of... My guess is you're not going to be doing a bunch of studio work to actually need to think about that. Yeah, the KOTOR 2 is available and up to date on Steam and good old games with mod support. The cut content added back in. That's one of the reasons we all thought that KOTOR 2 sucked when it came out. It was hated when it came out. Everybody thought it was really bad. And the reason was because it was unfinished. It was literally unfinished. Been reading Combat Frame XC while watching this awesome Let's Play, and I gotta say, XC feels like an 80s mecha anime on steroids, and that is always a good thing. I don't know if Brian's in the chat. He's usually hanging out on these streams, the author of Combat Frame XC. And I agree, they're good. There are people say it's the best mecha anime you've never seen. HP here. What recommendations do you have for making historical fiction when you have a very limited knowledge of history? Read about the period that you were thinking of writing in. It's the best thing I can tell you. I've written one historical fiction book, Muramasa Blood Drinker, which is actually in the... Oh! It's in the Krampus Christmas collection. So you can get it in the Krampus Christmas collection. Pretty much. Here's the actual cover. So this takes place in feudal Japan. Late Muromachi period. Might call it the Sengoku period. There's no like official thing when Sengoku period begins, which is Sengoku period's warring states. Basically, the shogunate's really weak, and all the samurai are fighting with each other for dominance, and that ends with Tokugawa Ieyasu, who basically unifies Japan under his rule. So read about the period that you want. So let's say you want to set something in medieval England, and you're thinking 14th century England. Well, read about what happened in 14th century England. There's not a... You can get some background, on other periods of England if you want, like, early England or Alfred the Great and Danish conquest, all that kind of stuff. But you should really focus on the period that you're thinking of writing in, because what makes historical fiction pop, in my opinion, is not knowing the historical events, but knowing what it was like in that period. So, feudal Japan, for instance, has customs that are different than modern Japan, obviously. And the customs of the Sengoku period are going to be different than the customs of the Edo period, which is, the peaceful period of shogun rule. So you kind of got to know what the society was like. That's more important to the story, I think, than just the historical events. Like if you read Muramasa, there's only one relevant historical event that is around that, and that's like a single battle that happens after the story's finished, and it's just mentioned in the epilogue. But it's kind of just things happening leading up to that, and it's all fictional. So to me, I call it historical fantasy because there's magic in it. It just depends on what you want to do. When is Code Gas 2 analysis coming? When I finish the second... I want to know if you hate it as much as I did. When I finish the second season. I'm trying to do more things besides that one series. Item. Heal. Keep our HP up here. I've had the Audio-Technica headphones for years. They're a little worn now, but very good. Great for the price. Yeah, the Audio-Technica stuff is good. My AKGs lasted... They would have lasted even longer had my son not accidentally broken them. And so I bought these Bear Dynamics as a replacement based on some recommendations from some friends who are just a little more into the equipment than I am. Like, I don't keep up on like what's the best equipment to have. That's not me. Like my gear, I haven't bought new gear in a long time. And like when I find gear that works, I just stick with it. I don't I have a lot of guitars already. I haven't bought a new guitar in years and years. So I just ask my friend Ron he keeps up on it. Or my friend Mike, he keeps up on it too. And I just ask them like, hey, what's the good thing? And they're like, well, these are good. So like, my friend Mike has these same headphones, and they're basically headphones I think he just took from my friend Ron. So they're good headphones. The Bear Dynamic ones. I was thinking Sam Totman from Dragon Force is basically like that. He's like, it's like, what equipment do you use? He's like, whatever Herman isn't using at the time is what equipment I use. He's like, he doesn't think about gear. He's like, Herman Lee, the other guitar player in Dragon Force, he's the one who like has all the gear, and he's just like, what's good? I'm using that. You know, some people are super like my amp is 30 years old at this point. It's old. Why replace it? It works. You know, it does what I want it to do. I barely use it now as it is because I have like virtual amps and stuff that honestly are less trouble than. Kind of wasted that Fire 2 magic. Oh well. Feels like modern things in general suck. No, I don't think that's the case. Smartphones don't suck. Smartphones are cool. Most modern things are good. My brother-in-law ran into this problem though. He bought a Hughes and Kettner amp, a tube amp with a bunch of cool features on it. It's a really cool amp. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I don't remember. It's not the Triamp, which is like the one that like Alex Lifeson uses. But like it kept having these popping and buzzing noises. He's like, man, I can't believe I've gotten 2 of these lemons. He changed out the tubes and it's flawless. Well, they were making the amps in China or something, but they were using Chinese tubes, Chinese vacuum tubes, and they were just garbage. So it really wasn't that like... You know, tubes are ancient technology at this point. Vacuum tubes. As soon as he changed them out to some Mesa tubes, which is what I have in my Mesa Boogie, obviously. You can use rubies. You can use a lot of different tubes. You can use Softtech tubes, the ones from Russia, that are a little bit cheaper, but they're still really good. As soon as he changed out the tubes to something not made in China, all of a sudden it was great. So yeah, modern things are actually pretty good. It's just, here's the other thing. So this is another thing about like, they don't make them the way they used to. You know, my brother and sister-in-law have a refrigerator. They have a Frigidaire refrigerator from like the 1950s, and it still works. And they have a Frigidaire stove and oven from the 1950s, and they still work. Like, wow, they don't make them like they used to. Truth is that all the ones that were going to break have already broken. So, of course, the refrigerators from 1950 that are still working are great. Because you're not seeing all the refrigerators that broke down and got thrown in the junkyard, you know? You're not seeing everything that's worn out in the past. You're just seeing the things which are Lindy. So it's easy to think everything from the past is Lindy because everything I see from the past is good. You know, everything I see from the past is good, therefore everything from the past is good. But you have to remember, you're not seeing all the stuff that people threw away that was garbage. It's the same thing with toys. Like, you know, there were some great toys from the 80s. I've kept them. And my son plays with them. There's also a lot of garbage from the 80s that got thrown away. We just don't see it. It's the same thing with, you know, music sucks nowadays. No, music's great nowadays. But when you're looking at music of the past, you're only seeing the music that's been filtered by time, that people continually have listened to for 40 years. So it's like, you know, no one's making music like the Beatles anymore. Well, half the Beatles catalog isn't even good. But more importantly, you know, people weren't just listening to the Beatles in the 60s. They listened to lots of things, most of which they stopped listening to after a while. So of course the songs that have been popular for 50 years are really good. If it's good enough for people to listen to for 50 years, it's going to be good. But it's wrong to think everything from that time is of the same quality. It is not. I saw some tech videos explaining how a microwave in the 90s was way better than modern microwaves. Yeah, there's if you're thinking of what's the channel? It's a good channel. I think it's called Technology Connections. He's got a guy, he just sits at a desk and talks about like how different technologies work. And he's like, this microwave from the 90s is better than modern microwaves. And it actually is, but not because the microwave technology in it is somehow better, but because the programming on it is better. It's a self-enclosed environment that has all of these settings in it, you know. And for whatever reason, manufacturers aren't doing that. My guess as to why manufacturers aren't doing it is because it simply wasn't that popular to do that. People were opting for microwaves with less settings. Nope. I clicked the wrong thing. Sorry. No effect. There we go. We only hear about the classics from those previous eras. We don't hear about all the crap that was being released at the same time. That's exactly correct. And I've basically made 3 different videos explaining this to people who think the music of the past was better. It's that plus another combination, which is the music you listened to when you were 15, you have a greater emotional attachment to than music you listen to when you're 30. So of course you're not going to feel the same about music today as you did when you were 15 and full of hormones. And like your brain was just making new connections all over the place every day and all that stuff. So it's just a natural bias towards the things that mattered more to you when you were young. Same reason, you know, everybody's favorite Final Fantasy game basically changes based on how old they are. So people who are my age and a little older, it's like, we're like Final Fantasy 6, Final Fantasy 4. People who are maybe even 1 year younger than me, like my friend Mike, my friend Matt, they're like Final Fantasy 7. That was their jam because, you know, that was like the first Final Fantasy game they played all the way through. It was the one that mattered to them when they were like a teenager. They're just a little bit younger, and then it makes all the difference. You know what I mean? Thank you for saying quality is filtered by time. I remember you making a video on that a while back. Great point. Yeah. It's like you ask someone, hey, what are the great composers of the past? They're going to be like, oh, it's Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, Mozart. Those are probably, maybe they might say Wagner. Then they're going to name 5 or less composers from different periods, usually. And if I ask, hey, what are the 5 best Baroque composers? They're going to be like, I don't even know what the Baroque is. And it's like, oh, what was this long period between, 1600 and the death of Bach in 1750? You had Handel and Bach and Vivaldi and, Bizet and, oh my gosh, they had so many different composers. I can't even think of them all off the top of my head. I can't even name 5 because there's so many different ones. And a lot of them, I've only played like 1 or 2 pieces by them, I haven't played a ton of pieces by, Sylvia's Weiss, for instance. I played like 1 Weiss piece, but I don't know. You remember it. Some kind of vacuum or something going on outside? Leaf blower? I don't know what's going on outside. I'm making my dog bark. Sort of how people praise this 1970s as the best decades for film. There's a lot of great films in the 70s. There's a lot of crap too. Blackula was from the 70s. I mean, like blaxploitation films and stuff, which you can like. I think Quentin Tarantino often references them just kind of semi-ironically. There was a ton of schlock. The 70s was considered also like the golden age of porn. But they're like high production quality porn. There was terrible movies in the 90s. Terrible games in the 90s. People forget about all the shovelware. It's like N64 was great because I liked GoldenEye. I put out a hot take where I was like, N64 was Nintendo's worst console. Which I was wrong. Virtual Boy is actually their worst console because I forgot about Virtual Boy. That's my fault. And so people remember having a really good time playing GoldenEye. But I'm like, even GoldenEye doesn't really hold up. But, I'm like, what are the games worth playing on N64? They're usually going to name 5. Or less. Think about, Ocarina of Time was really good. Super Mario 64 was really good. GoldenEye was really good. And then they're like, maybe Perfect Dark? Donkey Kong 64? Oh, Donkey Kong 64 actually sucked. You have trouble naming those after a while. Because those couple games that you played on the 64, which were really good, were really good. They were also made by Nintendo, most of them. So it was the first-party games that kept the Nintendo 64 from being just a forgotten console, I think. But, you know, lack of third-party support probably was what made it not as good as, say, other consoles at the time, like the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. Although now we think of the Sega Saturn as like the failure. It's like, no, Sega Saturn was very popular in Japan. Very popular. It was a success. The Dreamcast was also really awesome, but it didn't catch on in the West the way it needed to for Sega to really keep making consoles. You know, but the Nintendo 64 basically made a lot of, in my opinion, bad decisions about what direction to go in, let's say. You know, the main thing is they didn't go with CD-ROMs. They didn't go with larger storage, and that crippled the system compared to the technically less powerful PlayStation 1. But the PlayStation 1 had so much more storage, it just didn't matter. You could make much... You were just so limited by a little ROM cartridge. I'm still sad we never got that N64 Metroid, yeah. Yeah, the remakes of the N64 games are better than the originals. Yeah, the 64 traded really awesome aesthetics and graphics on the SNES for, I think J.D. Cowan said this, like 19 FPS fog. You really cannot look at those graphics and think that they've aged well. Now, at the time, some of them were impressive. I came from PC, so they were a little bit less impressive to me. But I get that they were, you know, 3D was the new hotness in 1996 and 97 and 98. So that's what people are looking for. They're like, yes, there's the... But it was 240p, chunky, jagged, blurry, foggy mess for the most part. It didn't age well. Now, that might have been a necessary step. You probably had to go through that so that you could get the high-quality graphics of the GameCube. I think the GameCube was Nintendo's last time to keep up with the Joneses as far as graphics go. Flash memory did get the last laugh over optical media. You're kind of right. I was so I'll just say this: I've been like jailbreaking and hacking a lot of my consoles. Like, I'm downloading a bunch of PSN games now on my Vita, but you can get half terabyte. Amazon has them on sale right now. Samsung half terabyte triple speed micro SD cards for $60. You can hold pretty much the entire PlayStation 1 library on that. You know? As I think about that for a minute. That's crazy. I have a harm spell. Sega made some bad decisions company-wise back then, like foregoing loan payments to make Vector Man. They also, I mean, they made a lot of decisions about putting out too much hardware. They just were like going crazy. They're like, let's just do it. Let's just put out another piece of hardware. Yeah, we'll have you make a version of a Saturn, you make a version of a Saturn. There's all kinds of different manufacturers making different versions of the Sega Saturn. It's wild. Ocarina of Time and Majora is better on the 3DS. I agree. And the SNES remakes for the handhelds were better than Sans LTTP. I'm not sure what that means. Just finished True Detective Season 2, but I thought Season 1 with Harrelson and McConaughey was way better and more tightly written. I haven't watched any of them. Nintendo is one of those weird companies that just does whatever the hell they want and still manage to make gobs of money. I think Nintendo makes money because they've always been innovative. Like, from the beginning, they've always tried wacky things. They kind of saved video games with Rob the Robot. As weird as Rob the Robot was and as lame as Rob the Robot was, having that dumb little robot made enough stores think that the NES was not a video game system that they were willing to sell it. And pretty much save video games. Pretty awesome. I think the GameCube was probably the last time that they were trying to keep up with the Joneses. Like, if you had a game and it was available for GameCube and PlayStation 2, it was generally going to be better on the GameCube. Higher graphical fidelity. You had 480p on the GameCube, which was really sharp at the time. You know, it was really good. You know, how did the Game Boy with its crappy screen end up being the dominant handheld? Well, it was cheaper, it had better battery life, it had more games. You know, Nintendo's always put good, solid effort into having great games. And I think that helps a lot too. Use one of these softs on Bob. But GameCube wasn't, I mean, if you look at it, it's like GameCube didn't sell as well as the PS2. PS2 is the best-selling console of all time. It's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's like you got second at the Mr. Olympia competition to Ronnie Coleman. Yes, everyone got second to Ronnie Coleman. Getting second to Ronnie Coleman is not a bad thing, right? You're talking about the best bodybuilder who ever lived. So the GameCube I still think was a successful console, and boy, there were a lot of good games on it. The Wii, I think, is worse than the GameCube because compared to its competition, it really was too weak. It didn't have HD output. It didn't have that many good games. The controls didn't work well with most third-party games. The motion controls just didn't work well unless Nintendo was doing it correctly. So the Wii was actually a pretty lame system. And I was thinking, is it worse than the N64? And it's like, it's better only because it had Virtual Console. It had a lot of other things going for it that were really good. The Wii U was way better than the Wii, but people didn't buy it because they thought the Wii U was like an upgrade for the Wii or something. They're like, oh, I guess it's a Wii 2.0. They should have named it something else. I think it kind of comes down to marketing. Like, as dumb as that is, it's like they marketed themselves into a losing position. Oh, I really want to save that. Here we go. The Wii had wasted potential. If they had made the Wii just a little bit better, I mean, I can't say that they were wrong with the Wii. They sold so much Wii. They sold like 100 million units of Wii. So clearly, if I'm like, I wish they would have made it a little bit better and maybe a little bit more expensive so that it could have had the games that were on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. Yeah, but it didn't need those games to be successful. I just want them because I would rather have had them on a Nintendo console, but that doesn't really matter. There we go. Yeah, the Wii did have a ton of great niche games. It also had like the WiiWare games. There was a lot of indie games on the Wii that were actually pretty cool. I think it's just a lot of mainline, I don't know what they call now, core games, which is kind of a dumb name, but anyway, we use it. Core games. They didn't have enough core games of a high enough quality. Like, there was Wii versions of like Call of Duty, which is ridiculous when you think about it. It's like a Wii version of Call of Duty. How weird is that? I still have my Nintendo Wii. Games have gotten expensive, though. See, I play them all on the Wii U because it's better to play them on the Wii U, where everything upscales. You don't have to unplug or unplug in any other console. Let's get these birds. I'm getting full use out of this Zeus armlet. Hey, Larry leveled up. All right, I think we've leveled up a bit. I'm going to go sell. I'm going to save the state. And go sell some stuff. Sean Maelstrom wrote about it, but part of the Wii's tragedy was Nintendo settled for making Super GameCube games before starving the Wii to death. To dev for the 3DS. Interesting. I had no idea about that. Call of Duty 4 Wii was just weird. I didn't understand that at all. The reason that they made it for Wii was simply big installed user base. You looked at it, you're like, there's 100 million people who have a Wii. It's just worth it to make a version for the Wii. Even if you only sell to a tiny portion of them, it's worth it. It's like, if you were to look at the numbers, it was probably totally justified. It's like, man, we sold 5 million copies on Xbox 360. We sold 4 million copies on PS3. We sold 1 million copies on Wii. There was 1 million copies still sold. It's like, who was buying that for the Wii? Clearly somebody was. I'm glad that 2D games had made a comeback. It felt lacking without side-scrollers and top-down sprites. Yeah, 2D games basically took a hiatus starting in like 1996, let's say, 1995. 2D games took a hiatus for almost 15 years. What draws the line between homage and ripoff? Credit, intent, something else? I think if it's clear, if the intent is clear that it's an homage, like it's obvious. A ripoff basically is like you're presenting it as it's an original idea versus making it very obvious that it's not. It's hard to do in practice. I can't give you guidelines for how to do it in practice. Like if you published a play that was in iambic pentameter, there's no way it's not going to reference Shakespeare in some way. Other things are less obvious. You know, and to me, homages need to be short. They shouldn't be an entire play. You don't need an entire play that's an homage to something. What's the point of that? I like goofier stuff. Big games don't do much for me. I miss more concentrated experiences as well. The idea that you could sit down and play a game and be done with it. Like Portal was a really good experience for that reason. Everyone likes Portal because of its original gameplay, but what they don't think about was the fact that Portal was over in like 6 or 8 hours or something, right? It was a really manageable experience that still felt substantial, but was good the whole way through, and it was short. This was a thing that they said, we may have to make our games only about 20 or 25 hours for the PS5 generation. And people are like, what? And I'm like, that's perfect. I want a 20-hour game that, like, when I get to the end of it, it feels like I've just watched a whole season. That's a whole season of, like, TV to watch. It's like, I want a 20-hour game that's really good for those 20 hours. Not a 60-hour game with a bunch of filler garbage. The difference between homage and ripoff is if you like it or hate it. Well, let's say I publish a fantasy novel about 3 little people going on an adventure to destroy a magic talisman. It's not a parody of Lord of the Rings. Do I just say it's an homage? No, it's just a ripoff. It's just... there's nothing original about that. An homage would be something that, like, takes the themes from that or takes some part of that and then presents it in a new way. Really. There was even a Call of Duty 4 for the DS. 100 plus million DS sold is a good enough reason. There you go. That's right, Pete. This is an installed user base. Like, man, why are they making all these... Why is Nintendo making phone games? Why'd they make Mario Kart Grand Tour? Because there's 500 million people that have the phone and could play it. It's an opportunity to make money. You'd be dumb not to do it. That's what I felt when I finished Sakuna. I'm going to play that one. Yeah, you told me to play it. I'll play it. It was just long and quirky enough. DMC 5 was about 10 hours to finish, but it's fantastic for replayability on harder difficulties. I haven't played Devil May Cry 5 yet. I haven't, but I haven't played it. The original Devil May Cry wasn't that long either. I think people really loved the original Devil May Cry, and it really wasn't all that long. And we'll save before we go. I gotta remember to save before we go. We gotta sell some stuff. And armor. Yeah, we gotta sell iron, silver, iron. Sell that. And use an iron thing here we'll sell. Anything we want to buy? I don't think so. See if there's any magic here we want to buy. Actually, I need to look at my magic. What magic do I have? What do you have? He has soft already. Alright. What does Odin have? I'd love to see your take on Devil May Cry 5 and what to me feels like very Christian themes. I should play the whole series. I really liked the first one, and everyone didn't like the second one, but I like this. I remember liking the second one when it came out. I haven't played it since then, though. Exit. You can't learn that. Huh. Maybe I got to maybe level up the... Maybe because that's a level 5 spell? I don't know. Life, cure... No, I think it's a level 6 spell. I don't think you can learn a level 6 spell, but we'll check it out. Lightning 3, rub. Quake. Stun. Rub sometimes works. I don't think you can learn it, though. If you had to pick America's Taiwan, what would it be? America's Taiwan? I don't know. The Philippines? I don't know. People are used to long games from SNES and Genesis that were designed as arcade games with insane difficulty curves meant to steal your money. Yes! There's nothing technically wrong with Devil May Cry 2. It's more than Dante's personality changed from a carefree goofball to a dark, brooding, edgy guy. I didn't think about that. God. I don't need to get any of this stuff. Alright. I guess we'll go. Save before we go. Buy a few more softs. Oh, I can't buy them here. We'll buy some heals. And then buy a house. That way we can save the game somewhere. Here we go. I recently had an homage ripoff debate on YouTube. A YouTuber named Dova Hattie announced he was ending his Roman history series. Another YouTuber copied his style and continued. Interesting. I don't think I would do that. Let's see what the point is. Probably just grind stuff right here. Giants. We got giants all over the place here. The other YouTuber copied the style almost exactly and basically picked up where Dovin Hattie left off. Then Dovin Hattie decided to come back and continue. Cue the drama. Are you on emulator? Yes, this is an emulator. I have the original cartridge somewhere, but I don't have the original manual. Okay, yeah. If you haven't seen it, like, the original manual for this is actually pretty cool. I've shown it on other streams here. This is what it looks like. This is the English manual. I might try to find let's try to find the Japanese manual, actually. Maybe someone's got it here. Internet Archive has it. Nope, this is not it. This might be it. 1989. It's totally different. Yeah, here, let me show you this one. Yeah. So here's the... What if I could just get the PDF here? Here, let's just get the PDF. Taken line off. Or an Internet Archive is pretty slow, but you can even get ROMs off Internet Archive if you know where to look. Copyright Square. Look at that cool art. See, you didn't get this cool art in the it's a download. Let's see if that'll work. Oop. These are freezing up. There it goes. Here we go. Put it back on here. Okay. Back up a little bit so you can see what it actually looks like here. Look at this cool art. Like, you didn't get this in the American version. The American version, this is the front art. Japanese one, it's like there's not even art. It just says Final Fantasy. But look at this cool art. Scenario, character. Yeah, I think this is a Yoshitaka Amano sketch here. Which is great. You're missing all this stuff's missing from the English version. See? This is pretty rad. Here's the map. The map is... I wonder if I could arrange it a little differently. Like, view... page display. 2-page view. Oh, it's not quite right. I wonder if I could offset it so that we could see these. See, they give you a map. They give you the full map in here, like a drawn map. It tells you where the airship is. It shows you where all the stuff is. A bunch of warnings. It tells you the different classes here. It's showing you the terrain. Tells you what this stuff means. Again, the Japanese, because this version, you start with Japanese. A 4-character set in Japanese can actually have a lot more things in it. You know what I mean? So four Japanese characters can say more because they're a whole syllable instead of just one letter. Actual drawings of the weapons. See, this is really what I prefer to see in a manual. Here's what this helmet looks like. Here's what this helmet looks like. And that's it. I think that's the whole manual. They don't tell you where to go at all. In this one, they're like, people are not going to figure this out. And probably because the translation was so weak that you really couldn't figure out where you're supposed to go very easily at all. But the Japanese manual is really sparse. America's Taiwan, where all the patriots flee when the country falls to neo-Bolshevism. The Russians didn't have one, and look what happened to them. Well, I don't know. Alaska? It's Texas? I believe Sumer was where the city-state emerged. Yeah, ancient Sumeria. You're probably right. Yeah, you're probably correct. Have you played the Silent Hill series? Yes, and I like them. So anyway, I just thought I'd show that to you. Pretty cool. I like this art. This art is awesome. Can't get enough of that. Yoshitaka Amano. Guess in the 50s it was Cuba. It would be like Puerto Rico nowadays. And Puerto Rico should be its own country. We keep talking about it. It's like, why do we have Puerto Rico as a territory? What's that about? Armor. Let's trade some things around here. Let's trade that. Oh, I forgot to look at weapons. Oh, I have enough room for weapons here. I should have sold the great axe though. Oh well. I doubt I'll get enough weapons to run out of room. If I do, I can drop the wooden staff. Guess we could all hope to be isekai'd. Isekai'd. Middle-aged businessman, arise in another world. Reincarnated as a backpack. Wait. That's right, I gave it to this guy. There we go. I guess we're at full health. Are you training to beat the ice cave? Yes. The original of that first illustration is in color, FYI. Good to know. I assumed that it was actually in color in some way. But I'm not going to go looking through the entire internet to find like the color version of the Japanese original manual. I got a Shotoran here. Wait. That's right. Are there any long book series that are worth it? Depends what you mean by long. I'm a fan of Malazan, Book of the Fallen. That's really long. There's Discworld, which is really long. I don't even know how many books there are in Discworld. I don't think... Okay, so Dune... Here's what I'll say about Dune. I think the first book, Dune, is worth reading. If you get onto book 2 and you don't like it, it's okay to stop. Because it pretty much is going to get worse than that the whole way through. Like, if you're attached to characters, Dune is not the series for you. you're going to be very unsatisfied with how the fact that you don't get to, like, none of the characters have good endings. The series isn't even finished. Chapter House Dune, I don't think, was supposed to be Frank Herbert's final book in the series at all. I mean, yeah, Frank Herbert's. And I wouldn't bother with the Brian Herbert Dune books. The ones he wrote with Kevin J. Anderson, I wouldn't bother. It's basically sanctioned fan fiction. Funcom got their dirty hands on the Dune license. Get ready for another broken survival game stuck in perpetual development. Development hell. You know what would be better is if... it'd be better if Odin had the heal staff, I think. And Larry had the Zeus. So if you wanted to go... I don't know. No, let's try that out. Let's trade those around. We'll trade Zeus here. And then we'll go weapon. And we'll trade the heal up to Odin and see if he can use it. That way we can double heal and double damage. If we need to. I feel like that optionality is better. Like can he heal? Let's find out. Let's find out. This guy's name is Ocho. Ocho means tea. No, Ocha. Ocha's tea. Never mind. Ocho is 8. Like, that's funny. His name is Ocho. Gotcha Games is what's causing the Butlerian Jihad, calling it now. I spent $7,000 and I never got... I don't know who the hot character in Genshin Impact is anymore, but... that character in Genshin Impact! Oh, we're poisoned. Probably could have done that more efficiently. Oh well. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it looks like a Marlboro. It probably is a Marlboro. Like it might in Japanese have said Marlboro. But you can't, you're limited to like 4 or 5 characters in the English version, so you have to come up with new names like Ocho. Look at that. We need to do it like this. Clee! Probably is. Evening, DWLW. As far as ASOIAF is great as is, but I can't recommend it. A Song of Ice and Fire, since it's currently unfinished. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if... I read the first book, and I don't think the first book's bad, but when I got to the end of it, I had no compulsion to read anymore. If that makes sense. I talked about this before. I'm like, it's not... I'm not saying it's bad, but I just got to the end, and I'm like, I'm done. You know, there was no one... when they killed what's-his-face? Lannister? Who did they kill? I can't even remember the names now. You know, they like surprise killed someone at the end, and it was like, what? Let's do magic. R2. Yeah, Malazan Book of the Fallen is 10 books, and they are freaking long, okay? So, like, the shortest book in the series, I think, is Gardens of the Moon, and it's 200,000 words. And they get longer from there, I think. Or maybe it's only like 180,000. Ned Stark, that's right. Ned Stark, yeah, they kill him at the end. And it's like, what? No, it was like a cool surprise ending, actually. Or was it Ed Stark? I don't remember. The one Sean Bean played him in the series. I didn't like the TV show. I thought the TV show was way boring. So I couldn't really get past 2 episodes in that. It was just too slow for me. I get it that a lot of people like that series. It's not for me. But yeah, Malazan Book of the Fallen is really long, but it's really good. If you want like the craziest world building possible, it's probably going to be that one. So people that are really into like world building, you know, like, oh, I want the world to be completely fleshed out and have a deep magic system. It's there, but it's done completely in an indirect fashion. They don't tell you how anything works. You have to just watch it, and you know, it's kind of like watching something and figuring it out how it works from there. And I actually like it. I think Erickson does as good a job as I've pretty much ever seen as far as that goes. When he got married, he changed his name to Wed Stark. We'll see if we're high enough to get past the A-Rub stuff. Nope. Oh, these wraiths. Larry got stunned. Let's do some magic. Get rid of these, maybe the images are more powerful than the wraiths. If you play later versions of the game, they won't swing into air. They'll actually hit guys, which is nice. Phil, Stark's death is the catalyst for the events of the subsequent books. True. Hard pill to swallow because we love Ned, but the subsequent books are still awesome. If you like them, that's cool. I might rate them eventually. But yeah, George R. R. Martin still hasn't finished the series, and now it's kind of like a running gag. It's like, you know. But I mean, if I were him, it's like, what incentive? It's like, I wake up in the morning, do I want to finish this book, or do I want to bang another Japanese hooker? It's really easy to make a decision when you're George R. R. Martin in that situation, right? It's like, I could make this book that everyone's probably going to hate. I can't win. I kind of told people what was happening for the show, and then everyone hated the show. So I got to figure out how to make the book good enough that people won't hate me. Or I could just call up another hooker and have fun today. I think I'll just do that. It's like when they made an Akira feature film before the manga was concluded. Did they do that? I didn't know that. What do you think of G.R.R. Martin's semi-feud with Tolkien's Ghost? I think it's really stupid. This is something that very insecure people do, by the way. Is like, you know, basically say that something else is bad, or like, here's the bad things about it. I think it's probably overblown, actually. I'm gonna take a step back. I think it's probably overblown. I think that's something that's selected to make people mad. I think he probably doesn't hate Tolkien at all. Same thing with Moorcock. Moorcock's like, I don't like merry old England Tolkien. Michael Moorcock really predates the Tolkien influence, so he can say stuff like that. This is like the bad corridor here. Mage. Here we go. Oh no! Rub still works. I only have so many life spells. Okay. Magic. Item. I do like in later Final Fantasy games, they give you places where you can use a tent in the dungeon to save your game and to refill all your magic and health. Like some of these feel just completely brutal, like going through some of these dungeons. What's on the other anime review list so far? Besides Code Geass, it's a bunch of stuff. I'll do Death Note because people want Death Note. Oh man, I think we're gonna have to reload a save here because I can only bring people back so many times. We have to go Fire 2. Zeus. Three of these little mages. Yeah, we're not strong enough to resist Rub, so we're gonna have to leave. Maybe we'll go do the volcano. Is Altered Carbon anything you've read? Nope. I'm kind of curious about it, having seen the pretty good Netflix show. Read the Neuromancer trilogy. I haven't read Altered Carbon. I don't watch those shows though, like, so take that how you will. I don't watch TV shows really. It's like if Game of Thrones is like the gold standard and I don't like Game of Thrones, I'm not going to like anything that's not as good as it. Let's just put it that way. I don't usually like shows unless they're very episodic like Star Trek. I do not like to sit down to a show and not have anything get resolved story-wise in an hour. It feels like a waste of my time. Most of them are so slow now, too. I can't do it. I think Martin said he wishes he could go to Middle Earth when he dies. Fantasy writers like to criticize Tolkien only for the attention they get. It's probably that, but also a combination of, he'll say 100 things that are good towards Tolkien, and what you see in the article is the selected thing about, like, George R.R. Martin says that, Tolkien is, like, for kids and doesn't describe enough penis and vagina stuff. And that's probably not how he actually thinks. So I just, like, stopped and thought about that. The fake news is fake news. So just because the fake news is describing George R.R. Martin, the fake news is going to do the same thing to George R.R. Martin that they do to everybody else, which is take everything they say out of context to get people to click on a headline. They're going to do it for a gaffe. I meant the book specifically. It's a cyberpunky series. No, I haven't. Sorry. I know. I'm saying you watched the show. I haven't seen the Netflix show. I don't know anything about it. And honestly, most popular modern fantasy stuff, I'm just not very into. It's all too slow paced, too woke. Pacing is like this lost art. Brevity is like the lost art of writing. It's like no one remembers how to write a book in less than 300,000 words that has any kind of plot. It's hard to do that. I mean, it's hard to be Michael Moorcock and write in 80,000 words what someone else would take 200,000 to write. It just is. It's not a skill that you just normally have. But I feel like publishers want long, boring books for some reason. It's just what the market's produced. These big tomes, these big door stoppers that you buy at the airport to fill your time up. It's like I felt that way with a lot of the Wheel of Time books. It's like, guys, like not even the bad ones. Like the bad ones are bad, but even the good ones could probably have been written in half the space that they're written. There's just a bunch of scenes that have no relevance to the plot. Just a bunch of superfluous garbage. And when there's a bunch of superfluous garbage, then what's the point? There should be 0 superfluous scenes in your book. 0. If you care about the reader's time and you want the reader to like your book, you wouldn't put a bunch of superfluous garbage in it. But for some reason, I think people have a mindset. It's like they pick up a book at the bookstore and they like plow through it even though it's not good. Once you read, say, like if you like grimdark fantasy, you should be reading Black Company books by, oh my God, what's the author's name? Man, I'm spacing on his name. You should read those. Okay. Then go back and try reading other stuff, and it's like, man, this stuff is so slow and boring and not believable. I think we'll try the volcano again. What did you think of the first Wheel of Time book, The Eye of the World? I really like it. I like the first 6. Then they start getting bad. So the first 4 are really good. The 5th one is good. The 6th one's okay. By about book 7, it's like, this is bad now. We've crossed the territory from okay to bad. And then they get like book 8, book 9 are like unreadable. And then book 10 starts to get better. And then Robert Jordan dies and Brandon Sanderson finishes it. And it's a pretty good finish. Stormlight Archives is like that. There's just so many minor characters and stories. I liked them at first, but then it became boring and confusing. I felt like book 2 is when the boring part took over, where the book is almost entirely superfluous, boring stuff that has nothing to do with the main conflict at hand. And by book 3, I think it becomes borderline unreadable. I think he Robert Jordaned himself big time. I think he just, like... I haven't bought the 4th one, which is saying something, because I think the first one was, like, really good. Black Company's good. Starship Troopers is 85,000 words. Blade Runner is 80,000 words, and Neuromancer is 90,000 words. Blade Runner's... you mean, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Which is way different than the movie, guys. Way different. Totally different themes are emphasized. I like the movie a lot, but yeah, I felt like book 3 of Stormlight Archive, it's just so boring. Even to get to the characters you care about, it's almost like the advice to read it would be, I mean, someone's got to come up with like an abridged version that just only has the characters you care about. And then the more you meet Shallon, the more you just hate her. Best way I can describe it. She just becomes a really annoying character after a while. What time is it? 2:36. We're getting towards the end of the stream. I haven't finished Oathbringer, and I'm not planning on coming back to the story. I just don't care anymore. Yeah, that's the worst thing that you can do is bore a reader. And if you bore them to the point where they don't care about characters that they really cared about, you've really failed as a writer. I don't know who Brandon Sanderson was hiring as an editor, but he did not do his job. Or he wasn't honest enough with his client. Wait, I was trying to get to here. Most of the people who are avid readers agree with me that Stormlight Archive gets really boring. When you've read a lot of books, this stuff just gets really boring. You know, it just doesn't, you know, it's just not the quality that you need. That's all. And I don't think Brandon Sanderson's a bad writer. I think he's a very good writer, but I think he is trying to make things, you know, he's got an epic in his mind, and he's got all these characters he cares about, and he doesn't really know how to, like, the first book weaves them pretty appropriately, but after that, once it starts to become boring, you start to really doubt whether you like that at all, because you just forget about all these minor little scenes. There's all these little minor scenes that gave a lot of flavor to what was going on, and I like those, like these little interludes. But then it's like that becomes a whole book after a while, and you're just like, what is going on? Are we ever going to resolve this conflict? Are we ever going to figure out what's going on? It would have been really beneficial if he just had stuck with a few major characters and just really followed them around. I kind of stopped at 10 books in the Vampire Hunter D series. See, I wanted to pick that series back up. And let me read the rest of the comment. The series is fantastic, but I realize D will never catch up with Dracula, so I really don't want to continue. Yeah. I think I stopped at 6 books because that was all that had been translated. That was a long time ago, guys, so I haven't read them in a long time. I want to do more Vampire Hunter D content because I actually like the books, and I think the books do a couple of really good jobs. They do what they do really well. And the translations aren't bad either. There's a couple things that you'll get from those, which is the idea of tense, past tense and stuff. It just functions different in the Japanese language if you study Japanese at all. So a lot of the things that we're really familiar with, and you know, we think of third person past tense being this way that you write books, and it is, but if you're translating from Japanese, that's not always something that they fluidly keep if they're writing, quote, prose. In Japanese, because it's not a language that has this subject predicate order thing that we have in English, it doesn't always translate the best. The translations, I think, are good. Let me be clear on that, but you have to be a little bit forgiving of how the translation is going to work in English. It's still a great story with great characters, good plot. There's always really good plot in them. Like the event sequence is always usually, you know, really good. They do some weird things with, like, you know, character voicing, I would say. They're not my favorite, but it's all good. Whenever you're dealing with translations, you have to keep those things in mind. A good story should be concise. It's not difficult to describe something in 5 paragraphs, but it's an art to describe something in a few words and make the reader feel something. Exactly. In a hole there lived a hobbit. Not a dark, dank, nasty hole, nor a dry, sandy hole. Tolkien was so good at this. This is definitely one of his strengths. I can tell whenever somebody hasn't read Tolkien because they will say he describes every blade of grass. That is absolutely the opposite of what Tolkien does. Tolkien describes big ideas and big things in a concise manner that most writers cannot even grasp today because they're used to writing. You know, you come from the academic environment. Just think about this and tell me if this is, you can tell me if this is your school experience. Is you are told you have to write a 5-page essay. So you figure out how to fill up 5 pages. That's not the way good writing works. Good writing would be, I need you to tell me everything that is important to know about this in as little space as possible. Under 2 pages. That's real writing. Real writing is doing it short, not long. So you come from an academic environment, and I believe that creative writing is probably the same way. It's like you need to write a 5,000 word short story, so you figure out how to take what should be a 500 word flash fiction story and torture it into 5,000 words, and that becomes the standard mode of writing. That's dumb. Tolkien did not come from that school. He studied epic poetry, which is very good at that. So if you read epic poetry, and remember he translated Beowulf. He was a scholar that knew Anglo-Saxon. And that classic poetry is very brief in its ability to convey big ideas. But you can also read Homer. And you can read Greek. Drama is also good at this. Conveying a lot of things in a small amount of space is what you had to do. Wait, I'm going backwards. What am I doing? Japanese stories are terrifying with their names. Oh, that sounds like a good name. What do you mean it has multiple layers of meaning? Taught you wrong as a joke. Yeah. So anyway, you come from that place where it's like you're taught to stretch your ideas into a long format, when in the real world you need to do the opposite. You need to condense ideas into an understandable and digestible format. Like in fact, I'm going to do that just to demonstrate something. Give me a sec. Whoa. It's okay, just my phone. Tripped over my mic cable. Just to demonstrate something. All right. Let's get a couple real guys out here. All right. So, here we go. My original copy of The Two Towers, very well loved. I love these colored ones with just the simple type. I love this kind of book design. It's not popular now. But Coming of Conan, Robert E. Howard. Let's take a look at Tolkien first. Whoa. Yeah, I tripped over my microphone cable. I think my kid was messing with it. He comes in and he unplugs everything because he thinks it's funny. All right. I'm just going to open this up to a random page. And we'll find some prose here. Well, I opened it up to a poem. Let me see. How did it go? Oh, how did it go? And then, like, Treebeard sings a song. Learn now the lore of living creatures. First name the four, the free peoples. Eldest of all, the elf children. Dwarf the delver, dark are his houses. Int the earthborn, old as mountains. Man the mortal, master of horses. So think about how quickly Tolkien describes big ideas just in that. You know, Tolkien comes from the poetry thing. They found that they were looking at a most extraordinary face. It belonged to a large, man-like, almost troll-like figure, at least 14 feet high, very sturdy, with a tall head and hardly any neck. That's actually rather brief. He's not describing like every detail there. Whether it was clad in stuff like green and gray bark or whether that was its hide was difficult to say. So he's letting you imagine with there. At any rate, the arms, at a short distance from the trunk, were not wrinkled, but covered with a brown, smooth skin. The large feet had 7 toes each. The lower part of the long face was covered with a sweeping gray beard, bushy, almost twiggy at the roots. thin and mossy at the ends, but at the moment the hobbits noted little but the eyes. These deep eyes were now surveying them, slow and solemn, but very penetrating. They were brown, shot with green light. Often afterwards, Pippin tried to describe his first impression of them. And then you have a more description in the voice of the character. It's actually very brief, the amount of detail he's actually packing in here. One felt as if there was an enormous well behind them, filled up with the ages of memory and long, slow, steady thinking. He's telling you how old he is, really. But their surface was sparkling with the present, like the sun shimmering on the outer leaves of a vast tree or on the ripples of a very deep lake. I don't know, but it felt as if something that grew in the ground, asleep you might say, or just feeling itself, as something between root tip and leaf tip, between deep earth and sky, had suddenly walked up and was considering you with the same slow care that it had given to its own inside affairs for endless years. And then we have more dialogue. So even though that's 2 paragraphs, and that's rather lengthy to describe this, he's trying to describe a tree-like int, a creature you've never seen before, kind of indirectly. You can glean from that, okay, he looks kind of like a tree. He has 7 toes, which means his physical arrangement is not that human-like. He's very big, and he looks very old. Room, room, murmured the voice. A deep voice like a very deep woodwind instrument. Oh, it sounds like a bassoon. A bassoon. You know, that's kind of what you're going to imagine here. So he can pack a ridiculous amount of detail actually into a small space. A modern writer would just not have that amount of detail, or would write it over several pages and try to interrupt it with dialogue and things like that, rather than just showing you what was there. Here's another one. He led the way under the huge branches of trees. This is in action. Old beyond guessing, they seemed. Great trailing beards of lichen hung from them, blowing and swaying in the breeze. Out of the shadows, the hobbits peeped, gazing back down the slope. Little furtive figures that in the dim light looked like elf children in the deeps of time, peering out of the wild wood in wonder at their first dawn. So he's actually describing things rather efficiently. And then Robert E. Howard. We'll just do Phoenix and the Sword, one of my favorites, which I think is the first one in this book. The Phoenix on the Sword. Here's the intro. It's from a make-believe lore book. Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Arias, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars. Nemedia, Ophir, Brithunia, Hyperborea, Zemoria with its dark-haired women and towers of spider-haunted mystery. Zingara with its chivalry, Koth that bordered on the pastoral lands of Shem, Stygia with its shadow-guarded tombs, Hyrcania, whose riders wore steel and silk and gold. But the proudest kingdom of the world was Aquilonia, reigning supreme in the dreaming west. Hither came Conan the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet. That's a good character introduction. Over shadowy spires and gleaming towers lay the ghostly darkness and silence that runs before the dawn. Into a dim alley, one of the veritable labyrinth of mysterious winding ways, 4 masked figures came hurriedly from a door, which a dusky hand furtively opened. They spoke not, but went swiftly into the gloom, cloaks wrapped closely about them. As silently as the ghosts of murdered men, they disappeared in the darkness. Behind them a sardonic countenance was framed in the partly open door. A pair of evil eyes glittered malevolently in the gloom. This sort of prose, I think, is lost in a lot of modern readers. Thank you for the super chat, 100 Years Bore. You know, it's that kind of description. What do you get? What are you gleaning from that? A modern writer would be like, there were 4 people that walked through this and would actually probably take twice as long to do it. And it would take so long, they would have to interrupt it with dialogue. And they'd put like 2 pages of dialogue of people saying nothing, trying to characterize these 4 figures. Robert E. Howard's like, I don't have that much space. We're just going to get on with it. Go into the night, creatures of the night, a voice mocked. Oh, fools, your doom hounds your heels like a blind dog, and you know it not. The speaker closed the door and bolted it, then turned and went up the corridor, candle in hand. He was a somber giant whose dusky skin revealed his Stygian blood. He came into an inner chamber where a tall, lean man in worn velvet lounged like a great lazy cat on a silken couch, sipping wine from a huge golden goblet. Well, Ascalante, said the Stygian, settling down the candle, your dupes have sunk into the streets like rats from their burrows. You work with strange tools. Anyway, so you get a lot of stuff that's like that. The jeweled throne. To tread the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet. Into this Conan, destined to wear the crown of all Aquilonia upon a troubled brow. Yeah, the efficiency of that kind of prose, I think, is lost on a lot of people. Especially Robert E. Howard, because he was writing for magazines. He didn't have the benefit of just tons of space to write all this stuff. You know? Anyway, so I thought I'd describe that. The idea that, like, Tolkien described every blade of grass is, like, nonsense. Even the most descriptive passage is pretty efficient. Am I going the right way or the wrong way? I don't even know now. I don't even know where I'm at. I actually need to end the stream soon. Seeing as modern fantasy is heavily focused on characterization, how can the author distinguish between superfluousness and proper characterization? Characterization should happen amid the plot. So if a scene exists, there's character setting plot. You need to be furthering at least one of those in every scene. If the characters are not making decisions, if they're talking, they should at least be trying to make a decision about what's going to happen. You know? If they're talking around the campfire, it should reveal something about the setting that's important. And Robert E. Howard does this. I could get the Cole book out. You know, there's these scenes of Cole standing around. Oh, I didn't do that right. There's these scenes of Cole, like, standing around the fire with these other Atlanteans talking about, like, their myths and stuff. And very briefly, but it does a lot. It does a lot of work. So you should be doing preferably all three. You should be working on all three things in every scene. And if you get a scene and it's not revealing something about the setting, this is really important for fantasy. It's not revealing something about the setting, it's not revealing something about the characters at the same time, it's not moving the plot forward, they're not at least trying to make decisions about the plot, then that's something you should cut. More often, what you probably have to do is to roll a couple of scenes into one. This is what I end up doing. Is there's two scenes. I take some of the dialogue that's important from the scene that otherwise is superfluous and put it in the more important event. And just rewrite those two scenes as one scene. And then it's a lot more efficient. You save, a lot of space when you do that. I don't know where I'm at. Totally forgot where I am in this map. And this map is so small. I don't know where I'm at. Where's the volcano? Volcano's over here. Maybe I was going the right way. Let's try it. We'll find out. You need advice for writing sad, sorrowful character scenes? I can't seem to think of any way for my main character to react other than say I'm sorry when they're faced with such a situation, because I don't. Well, you can keep it brief. There's nothing wrong with keeping it brief. If a character, if you could say, all he could say was, I'm sorry, and he turned away. That says a lot. There's a lot that can be a big, impactful moment. Because they need to show rather than, you want to show rather than tell. In this case, what I mean by that is, there's the volcano. I was in the right place. Rather than him say, I feel sad, you would have him do the things a sad person would do. Not respond, You know, those things are internal. If they're having an internal dialogue, you can have it as part of what they're doing. You know, the person can go away and weep. Like Tolkien would say, you know, he went away and wept bitterly until he was hoarse from crying. That's exactly what Tolkien said. Right? Is the main reason why new authors tend to take so long to describe a setting or characters is due to the fact that they are generally less literate than older authors? I don't think it's that. I think they're just not experienced doing it, and you're going from what's in your mind, right? Your mind is where it's at. So you're taking something out of your mind and you are trying to put it in the mind of someone else. So what's important in your mind isn't necessarily what's important in other people's minds. And so that's the thing that you have to learn. The barbarian archetype is naked and unashamed. That's Robert E. Howard has that, a naked barbarian. Steven Erikson has useless dialogue, but it's characterization, like how a lot of Tarantino dialogue is. Not sure if good or bad. Well, I actually say Steven Erikson does more than characterize. At the same time, he is indirectly revealing the nature of the world so that you have the proper expectations for where the plot is going to go. Just use this every time. So I wouldn't call it superfluous. Superfluous would be like Chasing Amy. They're sitting around talking about nothing. Or just talking about how they feel about something. It's like that should happen alongside and within other things. I think I already got some of the stuff out of here. Fire! We'll see how the Zeus works on him. You know, you just want to be efficient. So being efficient means like, if they're talking and revealing things about themselves, maybe it's while they are making decisions about where they're going to go next in the plot. They're trying to make decisions and figure stuff out. Those are all good ways to do it. I decided my character needed a day to show he had a social support structure so he wasn't a totally emotionally crippled mess from being a hated war bastard. David, have you had your IQ tested? Not since I was a kid. And it doesn't really matter. Go to a Mensa meeting and here's what you need to think about with IQ. People want to debate about IQ. It just doesn't really matter, okay? What matters is what you do, and that's it. All that matters is your outputs. Somebody that has... I've met so many college professors that are functionally retarded because they don't know anything. The things they know are wrong. They know only wrong things. You know, they could have an IQ of 150, which is a very high IQ. If they don't have a clue what they're doing, then it doesn't really matter what their IQ is. You know, why do you want to have your IQ tested? Who cares? Just do what you do. It's like, oh, this guy has 180 IQ. He learned Japanese in 6 weeks. This guy has 150 IQ. He learned Japanese in 8 weeks. This guy has 125 IQ. He learned it in 12 weeks. Or what's probably more appropriate is this guy has 150 IQ. He never learned Japanese because he's lazy. Right? Like it matters what you do, guys. Don't obsess over IQ. Oh, no. These giants hit hard. Yeah. The software matters, guys. The software matters more than the hardware. That's a good way of putting it. Go talk about like hardware and software. Like you're great. So you can do math problems fast. That's basically your processing power is high. You can process things really fast, right? You can sort information quickly. That's basically high IQ functioning. Great. That's awesome that if you're never presented with correct information, it doesn't matter how fast you sort it. It just doesn't matter. You know, take your typical college professor. Go put him in the field. He's stupider than the dirt poor Mexicans in the field because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He can't make $10 an hour because he doesn't know how to pick oranges. He doesn't even know how to pull fruit off a tree that's growing there. That's how stupid some people with high IQs are. Garbage in, garbage out. That's the programming rule. You can take a supercomputer and you put garbage code in, nothing comes out. What's going on? Yeah, doesn't matter. Okay, so don't worry so much about IQ. If you go have your IQ tested and it's anything above 90, you're pretty much good to go. Like for most of the things you want to do in your life. Maybe you can't be an aeronautical engineer, but who wants to do that? Who wants to go move away from their family to live in LA to be an aeronautical engineer? Originally, that's what I wanted to do because like I was really good at math and my test scores were ultra high and all this stuff. And then, later on in life, I realized that that's not the best course. I'm glad that I decided to take up music. I did music because I thought it was hard originally. I'm like, this is a good challenge, composing music. I would have had to move away from everything. That's what I wrote in that story, the Iron and Clay story. It's about a guy who's an aeronautical engineer, and I've known several aeronautical engineers. I have a great uncle who's a nuclear physicist. And there's only so many of those jobs, and you have to go to where the jobs are. So if you're looking to live in a small community, that's not the job you want. You want to be the baker or the farmer or the blacksmith. You don't want to be those things unless you just have a drive in your heart that like you're going to abandon everything that you know in order to go be an aeronautical engineer. I think I never got the treasure in that box. Let's go get it. I can confirm I excelled in schools while barely learning and yet have no idea what I'm doing with my life. Just pick a direction and go. And this is the thing is like, think about when you're a little kid, you're asked, how many times are you asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? Highest IQ in the world had his car broke down. So he just dropped out of college. Didn't think to fix that situation. There's pictures of Elon Musk fixing his own car because he didn't have the money to pay a mechanic. He had to learn how to do that. IQ wasn't even designed to test like high intelligence, just so you guys know. It was really designed to select for low intelligence, to find people who can't compute high amounts. And because of its Gaussian nature, like once you get out to basically everybody's clustered in the middle by design. That's not actually, how should I explain this? If you design a test that's designed to put people in the middle, what are you testing for? You're testing for the extremes. So you're testing for people who are not smart, and you're testing for people who are really smart. Once you get out past a certain point out of that bell curve, like any IQ over, say, like 125, you're in the very high IQ category, at least with like traditional IQ scores. And so it's, you're really smart. And the functional difference between those extremities requires a different test, basically, to determine. Anyway, I was going to talk about Mensa meetings. Go to a Mensa meeting and see how much those people have accomplished with their life. Most of them are losers, okay? They have super high IQ. They're losers. Okay? So you can care about it or you cannot care about it. If you want a big rebuttal of it, I mean, Nassim Taleb has a big thing that's like, it doesn't matter at all. It matters in some ways, but for you as an individual, it really doesn't matter as long as you are average or above. Most of the paths in your life are not going to be cut off to you. And then the super smart aeronautical engineer doesn't know how to farm because he just doesn't have the knowledge. Like there's something wrong with being a farmer. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a farmer or a mechanic. Or the super high IQ guy who makes $35,000 a year working part-time at the university pays a guy who makes $100,000 a year to fix his car. I worked with mechanics, this is now more than 10 years ago, who made $95,000 a year. They didn't have a high school degree, some of them. They were high school dropouts. They made $95,000 a year. You can also describe it as stupid is as stupid does, too. Giant sword. I wonder what this one does. Let's find that one. All right, I'm gonna test this. Bob, no wait, Bert has it. Bert, 42 damage. All right, now let's equip this and 40 damage. Okay, so it's still worse. All right, I guess we can sell that. We could trade it. I think the ice sword is actually the best one, so we're gonna keep the ice sword. Although it doesn't work in this area. Going back to nature is under threat is high IQ. Well, I mean, you're referencing what people do. So it's like what you do really, that's the main thing. Just focus on making good decisions. I remember this. I remember these discussions a couple years back about a couple things actually. Do Ice 2? Zeus. Couple years back, there's a belief in this like blank slate idea that if we get kids into school early and we teach them when they're early, they'll be smarter. That like the difference between the smart kids and the not smart kids is nothing inherent to them. Like they're not inherently smarter, but rather they were taught better. Their parents were more involved. Their parents read to them. So they were getting all these kids into preschool classes. And what they found is that the academic benefits of the early preschool, the state-funded early preschool, pretty much disappeared by like halfway through elementary school. Like they were there, but by the time they were in like third grade, they had fallen back to where their socioeconomic peers were. Which basically tells you that kids are not blank slates, but also that early intervention, it temporarily boosted it, but not permanently. In other words, people fall more or less into where they're kind of made to be, for lack of a better way to put it. But those kids, when they were adults, ended up doing better than their peers. And the conclusion was putting them in preschool actually gave them something that was missing from their life, which was simple human interaction. That it was the fact that there were caring adults in their lives that made the difference long term, rather than them getting some sort of academic boost that made them richer. They became richer even though they did just as poorly in school as their peers. They became richer because they had people who cared about them early on. That's weird to think about. That means that like our environment, a lot of people are really thinking along the wrong lines. They think success is the result of academic success. Now, I've known tons of people that had straight A's. Yeah, you guys probably know this. the kid who got straight A's was never the smartest kid, because you weren't graded on how smart you were. You know, the kids who had straight A's always had worse. They had worse test averages in the classes, and they always had worse test scores. I just couldn't stand doing homework. So I did as little homework as I could. I neglected doing it. I was lazy. So, you know, I had like a 3.8 average or something, right? Which was unacceptable from my mother's perspective, by the way. My mother was not Chinese or anything, but I needed to have 4.0 or it was a problem. My dad's like, I don't care what it is as long as you do your best. I'm like, Dad, I'm be honest. I'm not doing my best. I'm doing pretty far from my best most of the time. Most of the time, I'm just zoning out in class and doodling in my book, or like writing some random thing down that I'm thinking about, or doing nothing, thinking of nothing. You know, the kid who got straight A's was the kid who just did his homework. I think I talked about this in that video that's like, homework is dumb. Homework bad. I never gave homework as a teacher. I didn't say never, but I gave very little homework. Because I'm like, it's not... Grading you on homework doesn't certify any knowledge. It doesn't show that you know stuff. It just shows that you did work outside of your normal prescribed work hours. Like you're a better slave. I just don't like it. Anyway. Point is, the smart kids often didn't perform as well because they were lazy. Like me. And that persists into adulthood. You go to the Mensa meeting and there's a bunch of losers because they just don't put in the effort to do great things. Whereas somebody else that maybe is not as smart as them has a better tolerance for hard work. They better tolerate working while bored, and so they're more successful. There might actually be like some kind of sweet spot on IQ, like 125, that makes you really successful. I don't know. I don't know if anybody's really studied it. Like, I know that, like, from what I've seen, as far as money to IQ, there's like a 0.5 correlation, which is pretty low. Like, if you have higher IQ, you may make more money, but maybe not. You know, as long as you're not actually retarded, you're probably okay as far as being able to be successful in life. What am I doing here? I think these guys have pretty low health, so let's do the Zeus. Homework is important for subjects like math. Practice makes perfect. I'll double down on this. Homework is dumb. If you don't have enough time in your class to practice, to do the independent practice that's necessary for math, then the class should be longer. So there's two arguments for homework, and both are bunk. One is there's not enough time in the day to do all the work that's necessary. Well, you should lower the requirements or lengthen the day. If 8 hours of school is not enough, then school needs to be 10 hours. There's a tacit, or in other words, silent. There's a silent argument that the school day is not long enough. The other one is that, well, we need to teach good work habits. What the hell are good work habits? What does good work habits mean? Oh, that means doing your work diligently outside of your prescribed work time like a good little slave. Slaves got to go home and rest when the taskmaster was done with them. You know, we're teaching our kids to be like mental slaves, not just like bonded. Silver. Oh man, we're gonna run out of space here, huh? Let's see. Silver. I don't think I can equip this. All right, trade. Equip silver. And we'll drop the iron. We have a silver helm. I didn't realize how much treasure there was. Yeah. So that's what it is. It's like if it's a cabin, sweet. If the day is not long enough, make it longer. Or lower your expectations. Whoa, look at that gray. Look at this worm. What a great graphic this is. Look, he's got like spittle and stuff. This is awesome. The cool math doesn't even start till junior level college courses. And once you get into like Diffie Q, math gets crazy at its limits. My son really likes doing math because he feels really good at it. And he hates doing handwriting because he feels bad at it. So I have to make him do lots of handwriting. And he's like, why do I have to do this? I'm like, because you need to know how to write things, bro. You got to be able to write things for other people. Asked him what he wants to I'm like, have you thought about anything you want to do when you grow up, like for a job? And he's like, well, I want to write stories like you. I'm like, great. Should think about at least one other thing. I got an alligator in math. I hated homework. Why have me look up an answer when they could have just told me the damn answer? Yeah, homework is more about enforcing. It's rewarding certain work habits. And when you understand that, then it's way more dystopian to me. I don't like homework. Completely agree about homework being useless. The only homework I thought was justified is AP US History because we worked our butts off in class, and the class just wasn't long enough. There you go. It's like there really wasn't enough, and I could see that with AP classes actually. And I kind of said that. I'm like, when you get to a college class, it's more lecture plus homework because there's not really enough time to do everything. It's expected that you're gonna have 3 hours of lecture and 3 hours of homework to save the professor's time, so he's not guiding you through independent practice. I understand that. It's just most homework at the like the schooling level, the public school level, it's pointless. You're wasting kids' time. Kids need to be out playing with each other and socializing and learning other things from their parents, like how to grow grapes. They shouldn't be spending their time cooped up doing homework. Let me come home from my 8 hours of school and do homework for 2 hours. That's horrible to do to children. It's one of the reasons I homeschool. There's no homework when you homeschool. There's independent practice. But when you're done with your work, you're done. Dad, am I done? Yeah. Can I watch TV? Yeah, you got some time. You can watch TV. You can watch TV for a few minutes. All right, Dad, I'm done. Let's go to the park. Yes, let's go to the park. Can't go to the park till we finish our work. But we can go to the park afterwards. Armor. What did we get here? Silver shield. Equip. We have silver helms. Need to get another silver armor here for this guy. Homework ended up being a mixture of busy work and punishment during my middle school years. That's the idea. Teachers will justify it as that. They're like, how, and in fact, if you dig deep enough, teachers will say, how can we, if you don't let us make homework part of their grade, how will we pass kids who aren't smart enough? Is basically what it comes down to. These kids aren't smart enough and they can't do any math. We have to grade on homework so that they can get a C. If they can't get a C on the test, if they can't do the math to get a C, they should not be in that math class. They are not proficient in it. They should not be passing it. The certification literally means nothing. They argue for homework against the purposes of certifying anything. It's crazy. But that's how a lot of teachers actually feel. They actually feel like we need homework so that kids who aren't as smart can still pass the class. They don't use those words, but that's what it comes down to. Well, they're like, well, of course, Billy has no problem doing all the math without having to do homework. But what about Jenny, who fails all the tests? She needs to do the homework. If she's failing all the tests, she shouldn't pass the class. You should teach cool things in school, like building robots and carpentry. Yeah, we got rid of wood shop. Now, when I was in middle school, we actually had it was called the tech cycle or something. We had these trimesters of different classes. And one was like industrial technology, which was just like a shop class. Learned how to like use saws and stuff. We even made these cool like paper rockets we shot with an air compressor. Then we had a rocketry class where we built model rockets. How freaking cool was that? And learned about stuff like that. And then we had, I don't remember what the third one was. I'm spacing on that one. I think I have to go back around this way. Donald Duck was based in Redfield. Let's get some more HP here. Building robots and carpentry both require math. They do. Everything, and I have to tell my kid this, everything is math and reading and writing. If it's reading, writing, arithmetic, if you don't have those three things down, you can't do anything. If you have those three down, you can learn or do anything else. If you're really good at math, the limits are pretty wide open, you know? I don't remember where this goes. I probably could have avoided all that damage, huh? Oh well. Fight. And heal. Man, these items are doing so much work for me. My county has a VOTEC school that the regular school bus high schoolers. That the regular... Oh, okay, yeah, they bus them into the special school. Yeah, that's a cool idea. But that's why I like homeschooling, because I don't have to bust my kid anymore. It's like, you want to learn gunsmithing? Let's learn some gunsmithing. I'll teach you what my dad taught me. Test taking is a skill too. I agree. You're right. So tests don't just measure proficiency in subject. They do for a large part, though. Here's the thing about math. If you can't do math independent of something to remind you of how to do math, then you actually can't do the math. That's my opinion. So tests are very valid in a number of different subjects. When it comes to something like, say, composition, like writing a story or writing an essay, having a testing situation, really you have to test the thing. You have to have them take their time and write it. And if they take 8 hours to write it or 3 hours, maybe the super smart kid can write it in 3 hours. What matters is the output. You're grading them on the output. Can he actually write an essay? You know, that's really what matters. In my opinion. Damn, I gave up on math by junior year of high school. Most of the time, you're going to have enough math by junior year in high school to do most things that you need to do. But I've talked to lots of people that are like, I hated math until I had to use it. It's like I hated math until I was taking this class on like investment, where all of a sudden the math was useful because I thought the math could make me money. And then I really liked math. It's funny how that works. Like when the math has some sort of practical point, all of a sudden it becomes interesting to people. There's nothing quite like being locked in a prison every day with hundreds of people who don't want to be there. Yeah, really. You can't BS math. I don't think you can. In my school, kids were grouped in their levels. You have the LD, Learning Disabilities class, low level, mid, and whiz kids. Yeah, we used to do that. I mean, this is a bigger subject to talk about, like what's called inclusion. So I wonder if there's anything in that corner. I don't think there is. Inclusion is an idea that is somewhat controversial, but I don't think it's that controversial, honest. But basically putting learning disabled kids into mainstream, quote, mainstream classes. Now, this is supposedly better for the kids who have whatever their learning disability is, right? Because they're exposed to higher concepts. I think it really has to do with social things, is that the higher level kids are also higher level socially, and they help the social aspects of the kid a lot. The problem with that is that I can tell you as a teacher that takes time away from the more abled kids. And so the more you put disabled kids in with exceptional kids, the more you're victimizing the exceptional kids. They're never going to get the education, honestly, that they deserve. It's great. I think that's why I say, public school is great. If you are in that middle, if you're in the middle of the bell curve, it's great. If you're lower on the bell curve, it might be okay with inclusion as far as socially goes, but you're going to be lost academically. It also gives the teacher a lot of extra work. You know, they have to basically do a lot of special stuff for the kids who have some sort of learning disability or intellectually disabled. They have to do a lot of extra work for them. And that comes at the expense of the smart kids. If you're really smart, public school is not really going to be a very useful or productive place for you. Ancient Greeks and Romans could build the Pantheon and Colosseum with about an Algebra 2 math understanding. They really knew how to apply it. My friend teaches math in high school and has a class where learning disabled kids are being put into regular classes. That's very standard now. That's the general wisdom, is to put them to mainstream them, and then you test them at a different level. So it's called accommodations and modifications. So an accommodation would be, let me see if I can give you guys some examples here. An example of an accommodation would be the kid can't see very good, so we put him at the front of the class. A modification would be the kid is blind, so he has to have tests that are braille, or even actually that's an accommodation. And a modification would be he has to do less math problems because, he's learning disabled, or he has some other disability there. That's a modification. Modifications and accommodations do come at the impact of the other kids. And you're never going to find a lot of modern mainstream educators admit that, but it always does. If you're spending your time making and grading special tests for a kid, and a lot of times the special ed teacher manages this and does it for you, but you still have to take class time away from the other kids in order to teach that kid. Especially, he takes a lot of extra time. That's just reality. It's the standard thing now. I dealt with it when I was a public school teacher. Your kids, if they're in public school, will also have to deal with it. Logical thinking is sorely lacking. Yeah. I think it was Aristotle. It was like, some people can never be convinced by reason. Spam this heal staff. Let's see if we can keep our HP up here. Heal. Aristotle had a theory on natural slaves. Slavery was considered a natural and normal human institution throughout most of human history. It's actually rather novel that we were able to say no more slavery. It's kind of, it was unprecedented, actually. Without, like, straight up slave revolts. Wizard Ogre dies. Oh man, we gotta walk through a lot of lava here. Let's check over here. See, this is where like a map, an interior map would come in super handy. There it is. You know what I mean? Let's check our health. It's pretty low here. I really need to kill this stream, but I'm having really fun talking to you guys and playing this game. I'm having a lot of fun here. Will slavery be brought back, albeit reworded in Newspeak? I feel like if there's some kind of backslide, I could see it. I mean, we already have indentured servitude being brought back in the form of H-1B visas. H-1B visa, basically, somebody decides to immigrate here, gets paid way below the going rate for their skill set, and then basically can't quit their job. So like that, those Indian tech workers are here in an H-1B visa. They're basically like indentured servants. They get paid way under what they're worth, and they can't leave their job without facing deportation. Just like an Irish indentured servant. Oh. Agama. It's Agama. What's your take on the Civil War, Lincoln, and was it about slavery? Everyone has their own opinions on the matter. I think, well, first of all, I think it was at least partially about slavery. That's not... the question is, why did the North wage the war? Because usually when we say it's about slavery, I think the South seceded from the Union, and a strong reason was because they were afraid of losing slaves. I just honestly think that's the case. Can use a heal here, double heal. Now, why did the North decide to go to war? Was it to free the slaves? I don't think it was. I think the North went to war for its own economic reasons and its own ideological reasons that really weren't about slavery. I haven't seen a lot of propaganda from the time that was like, we need to go fight the South so we can free the slaves. Like, do you? Maybe you saw different propaganda than me. But I didn't see a lot of recruitment stuff that's like, come on, join up, let's go free the slaves. It's always like, preserve the Union, but really, some people pointed out it was probably about like maintaining the money coming in from port. All the ports were in the South. So that meant that the U.S. government, which was funded by tariffs, would have to find some other way to fund their government. They didn't want to do it. So I don't think the North went to war with the South primarily to free the slaves. I think that was a good result that happened from it, and that became one of the motivators towards the end. And it kind of proved that Lincoln was exactly about what the South feared, which was freeing the slaves. I don't think you could say the South seceded for reasons other than, like, the slavery wasn't a factor in that at all. The elites owned a lot of slaves. They're the ones who decided a lot of the politics of the time. Gold. All right, are we going down or left? That's the question. The South was home to 75% of the ports in the nation. If they were able to secede, the North would miss out on all that sweet tariff money. Yes, I think that's exactly what I said. Not to mention that those H-1B visa people also bring down the wages of the citizens. Yeah, labor has a supply and demand curve, just like everything else. It's not magically... You don't magically have labor immune to supply and demand. This is the whole thing about immigration, is that if you have infinite labor supply through infinite immigration, wages are highly suppressed. Now, that's great for mega corporations, because the mega corporations would love to pay people no money and get the benefit of their labor. And it's great for a lot of mid-level consumers because they get paid their managerial salary and are able to get the benefit of low wages at the bottom end of the economic spectrum there. But it's really bad for everybody else. Spam this heal staff. As I get older, I find myself sympathizing more and more with the Confederacy, and I'm black. when you take the slave aspect out of the equation, I really feel the South was justified. Well, the South, I mean, the South had a long history of the northern states using nullification to avoid enforcing, say, like, laws that benefited the South. I think the Fugitive Slave Act was one of them. I'm trying to remember there's some other ones there. That's the one that most people talk about because it's got, it's a slavery thing. But there were other ones. So, like, state nullification was an issue, and there's more issues than slavery, but I don't think that the South would have seceded had slavery not existed in the South already. Like, I think if the slaves had been freed in the Revolutionary War, there probably wouldn't have been a civil war. Like, I think we probably would have worked it out. 10 gold. Totally worth my time. I always imagine taking a time machine and asking the Civil War soldiers what they were fighting for. I honestly believe the South lost because it was God's will to end the chattel slave trade. That's a take, which is also why the British did their crusade against the Arab slavers at the time. Slavery needed to go. It should have gone at the Revolutionary War. Like, it's not a morally tolerable institution. Now, you cannot say you have a free society when they're slaves. That just doesn't work. Now, the Greeks did it. They're like, to be Greek meant to be free, but the Greeks had slaves. I think someone pointed out that the word Slav, like the word slave, comes from the word Slav. Because the Slavs were the slaves. I know the word barbarian comes from the Greek barbaros, and it comes because the Greeks thought anybody that wasn't Greek said bar a lot. So that's where the word barbarian comes from. They say barbar. They're a barbarian. They say barbar. Because all the speech of the Black Seas and Macedonia, they sounded like bar. He's getting my money out of this heel staff. I heard there's more slaves alive today than any time in history. Yeah, but that could be, it depends on how you define slavery, and it could be a function of population. Where it's like 20% of the population was slaves. Well, now it's 1% of the population, but the population's 100 times bigger. So there's more slaves. Could be something like that. How long do you think it will take for separatist movement to gain political traction in the U.S.? I don't know. The South was doomed. Only due to the high amount of West Point graduates and Mexican war veterans did they hold out so long. Yeah. Economically, they just didn't have the resources. They didn't have as big an industrial war machine as the North. And it was like they lived their agrarian lives. A wooden staff, that's great. Agama! We're getting all the way healed up with these Agamas. Apparently there's a very specific way for states to have seceded from the Union. I don't think that's true. There was nothing provisionally to say that states couldn't secede, and the South was like, well, we'll leave. Nothing to say this was permanent, and then the North decided with force of arms that the Union was permanent. And that's actually, I say that's when the United States was converted from a confederation into an actual empire. We can't leave Washington. All our tribute goes to Washington. Let's try ice. Bet ice will work good. I got some of that Slavic ancestry. Who's going to pay me my reparations? The Greeks! They're broke right now, but hey, Greeks! Give me some of that sweet Greek money. Also, the people of Rome should be paying the Sicilians. Sicily was a giant slave colony. And it routinely had like slave uprisings that they had to send legions down. Sicily fell out of the control of Rome like a bunch of times between the 2nd and 1st century BC because of slave uprisings. They just couldn't keep them Sicilian slaves. Couldn't keep them down. I think the interpretation of the 10th Amendment should allow the states to decide their process for secession since the Constitution says nothing about it. Yeah, well, that argument is moot because the Constitution only means what either 5 unelected black wizards say it shall mean or what force of arms say it means. I don't know which direction I'm supposed to go here, so I'm just going this way. We're exploring. Oh, let's do that heal staff. Zeus. What's weird is it's possible there would have been a World War I back in the 1860s over the U.S. Civil War. Russia and Prussia with the Union and Britain and France with the Confederacy. That'd be an interesting alternate history rather than we went back in time and gave an AK-47 to the South and they won. And we're from South Africa. I think that was the Turtle Dove books, which I had a friend who was really into those in junior high, I think. And like I read them and I was like, this is so dumb. I made a whole video on like, it's dumb. It's like, we're going to turn the tide of the Civil War by giving them AK-47s. It's like, they have no way to load the ammunition. They have no access to smokeless powder. Okay, we'll bring enough AK-47s and enough ammo for them to win the war, but then they're basically helpless after that. Bringing one piece of technology back to the past doesn't really work because... Ooh. Nothing here. Candelabras. Apparently this is not the right way to go. Anything made by man can also be refashioned by man. In the Supreme Court case of Texas versus White, the state seceded, the Union brings them back in via war, and then they rule in the Supreme Court that the secession is illegal. There you go. I started a war with my group of Bigfoot. They took over my area and now it's time to push them out. Where do I get a Buster Sword for Civil War II? You have to make one. The problem is getting enough steroids to wield it correctly. During wartime. You gotta stockpile that Trembolone. Get your Trembolone stockpile up. Because if you actually want to use a Buster Sword, you gotta be sauced to the gills. Bull! Of course, there's Minotaurs at the bottom of the labyrinth. Let's hit him with some... Lightning 2. Lightning 2. Why do conservatives virtue signal by saying Abraham Lincoln was one of the best presidents ever, when he was the one that destroyed the U.S. Republic Federation and turned it into an empire? He also, like, imprisoned journalists and did all kinds of things like that. I think I'm actually out of time for this stream. I've been playing way too long. What time is it? 3:45. Yeah, I've been going a while. I'm gonna kill these guys and then I'm gonna have to call it here. If Abby can get her steroids in The Last of Us 2, then so can we. Here we go. More health. There's plenty of math that is related to epistemology. Epistemology. What can we prove to be true? See you guys, my battery's dead. Yeah, it's about time for me to call it too. Alright. So I got it saved. Got my save state so I can just stop the stream wherever. But I appreciate everybody stopping by, hanging out with me. I will see you guys next time. And I do hope you'll support indie authors like myself. So you can still get the Krampus Christmas 2020. So that'll be available through the end of the month. I'm going to have some more. I'm going to turn this off and get to making more content and stuff like that. Stay cool, and I'll see you guys next time.